We now present For the Record.
Democratic governors from across the country converge on Madison. We check in with how they're charting a course to next year's midterm elections. Plus, we check in with a lawmaker introducing a slate of bills to claw back money going from Wisconsin to Washington, and director of a local child advocacy center on reporting crimes dealing with children. Welcome to For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. We will get to that governor's event in just a moment, but we start this week in high school auditoriums across Wisconsin as lawmakers in the U.S. House of Representatives return home for the August recess. Now, many of them are holding town halls to hear concerns from constituents. Now, that included Janesville Congressman Brian Stile, who spoke in Elkhorn on Thursday to, at some points, a frustrated crowd. Here's Stile answering questions on tariffs.
I really feel that this is a terrible tax that's going to be placed upon the citizens of the United States.
This really, at its core, needs to be an opportunity to make sure that other countries are treating the United States fairly. The United States, I'm not looking. I want to be able to get through as many of your questions as we can.
Now, on the other side of the state, Dane County Congressman Mark Pocan traveled to the western Wisconsin 3rd Congressional District to hold his town hall. Now, it's the 5th time that he's held a town hall in Derek Van Orden's district, the Republican who Pocan is often at odds with. Now, the event was held in Van Orden's hometown of Prairie du Chien, but the congressman did not attend. Instead, organizers Opportunity Wisconsin placed an empty chair on stage in place of Van Orden.
Derek has never done an open public town hall. And he's been in office 2.5 years. I've been in office 12.5 years. And this is actually my 5th town hall in the 3rd Congressional District, because people have a right to be heard, especially when Congress is doing the sort of things we're doing right now.
Now, that Pocan town hall was held the same day that it came to light the protesters delivered a coffin to Representative Brian Stile's house in Janesville. Now, we asked Pocan about that protest.
I have not seen much more than just a few pictures on social media, but, you know, to me the most effective thing is you talk about a bill that's going to really hurt people and you let them know who voted for it. And I think, you know, the more we talk about things that impact people at the kitchen table when they're talking about their finances is how you are going to win elections. And I think I'm going to keep doing that anyway.
As Pocan was traveling in Van Orden's district, the western Wisconsin congressman also attended a bill signing in the White House on Wednesday. Now, he is one of the lead sponsors of that bill that would expand mortgage assistance for veterans. Now, the bill would allocate money to the VA to help veterans who are in danger of having their homes foreclosed on.
It helps keep our promise to end veterans' homelessness, and we're going to do that for America. We're going to do that for our great veterans. I'm thrilled to be joined by the bill's sponsor, Congressman Derek Van Orden.
Now, back in Madison, the newest member of the Wisconsin Supreme Court was sworn in on Friday. Justice Susan Crawford won that seat in April, beating former Republican Attorney General Brad Schimmel. Now, she replaces retiring Justice Ann Walsh Bradley, and her election keeps the court at a 4-3 liberal majority.
The challenging we face now might be different, but the stakes are just as high. The questions that come before the court still shape and protect our democracy, our communities, and the rights of everyone who calls Wisconsin home. I'm proud to take my seat on this court, and I'm ready to meet this moment.
And as we continue to track the elections next fall, we can move Sarah Godlewski out of the column of possible gubernatorial candidates, as it's reported by the Associated Press that she's considering a run for lieutenant governor. Now, Godlewski has already been elected statewide as the state treasurer and secretary of state. Now, this will be a step into a more visible role if Godlewski decides to run. Now, that leaves on the Democratic side just the current Lieutenant Governor, Sarah Rodriguez, as the only announced candidate so far. Now, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley has also indicated that he might join the race very soon. On the Republican side, we have Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman and southeastern Wisconsin businessman Bill Berrien already in the race. We're expecting an announcement from Northwoods Congressman Tom Tiffany coming soon in that race. Now, next fall's governor's race in Wisconsin will be in the national spotlight as well. Now, the race is currently a toss-up between Democrats and Republicans, and this is a seat which Democrats will want to keep. And so on Friday, the Democratic Governors Association convened at the Monona Terrace to talk strategy for next year. We caught up with those governors, including Tim Walz of Minnesota, about what that strategy will look like.
I'm a big believer, too, that Donald Trump sucks up so much oxygen, so much media oxygen, that all of us need to be out there listening to people, hearing what they're saying, and filling in, flooding that zone with better policy ideas, or at least listening to them. So for me, I'm going to be out there, and I've said this, I'm going to keep working up to the last minute to help make sure that we elect a Democrat to start straightening this stuff out.
For more on that path forward for Democrats, we spoke with Sam Newton, Communications Director for the Democratic Governors Association. Here's more. So I want to get a sense, kind of initially, at like a 30,000-foot view, what the DGA does.
Absolutely. The DGA is the Democratic Governors Association. We are the only national organization specifically focused on electing and re-electing Democratic governors, and I like to think we're pretty good at it. We have 23 Democratic governors who represent a majority of the U.S. population, including in 5 out of 7 swing states from last year, and deep red states like Kansas and Kentucky. And these races really matter more than they ever have before, especially with the chaos in D.C., Donald Trump attacking healthcare, attacking SNAP, the tariffs that we're just hearing more about today that are raising prices. Democratic governors are the leaders in the country that are standing up and actually getting things done for people every single day.
And why decide to hold this conference here in Madison?
You know, we're always traveling around the country, having our conferences with our governors. We've been incredibly grateful to have Governor Evers, who's been a transformational governor. You know this, he's been Wisconsin's education governor, fully funding schools, reversing the damage of Scott Walker's assault on working families. And so it's been really important to be here. And we know that Wisconsin's going to be a top battleground in 2026 with a really high stakes governor's race. And we're going to be incredibly focused on making sure that it stays in Democratic hands.
Yeah, how much is Wisconsin on the map?
Yeah, so we have 38 races over the next 2 years, and Wisconsin's going to be a top-tier battleground. We know it is a toss-up race. It is always very close. Governor Evers has proven that he can win really tough races. We know 2026 will be really tough. And on the Republican side, we expect a pretty crowded, messy Republican primary of, you know, Republicans who are going to run to the far right. They're going to bend the knee to Donald Trump. They're going to support his health care cuts. They're going to support his cuts to food assistance. They are going to be talking about banning abortion and ripping away fundamental freedoms. And so we also have a pretty strong Democratic bench on our side, and we're expecting to have a close race of a contrast between a strong Democratic nominee who's focused on delivering on those everyday issues that make people's lives better versus, you know, a Republican who would really just take the state off the rails.
So in Wisconsin here, we have this kind of idea where the Democratic Party here locally in Wisconsin is a lot more popular for Wisconsin voters than the National Democratic Party. I'm sure someone in your position, you have to kind of like navigate that, right? How do you translate from your perspective the good things that governors are doing locally in their own states and kind of share that message nationally and kind of share that game plan nationally heading into 2026?
Yeah, you know, we never want to brush off the work that our party has to do to win back the trust of certain groups of voters. We always want to broaden our coalition, broaden our tent, and I think Governor Evers and Wisconsin Democrats have accomplished is a really great example of that. Governor Evers has won 2 really tough elections. We're going to do the same thing in 2026. And again, we have 23 Democratic governors. They represent a majority of the U.S. population in states like Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina. And that's because our governors are focused on delivering and making people's lives better every single day. Funding schools, protecting healthcare, creating jobs, and protecting rights.
When we come back, we check in with a Wisconsin lawmaker introducing a bill to limit the money Wisconsin is sending to the Trump administration. And later, we chat with a local child advocate about resources to help prevent child sex crimes in the community. We'll be right back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. A new package of bills introduced in the state legislature would allow Wisconsin to claw back funds that it sends to the federal government in Washington if the feds withhold those funds that are supposed to be coming back into Wisconsin. Now, these bills would also shield some personal data from Wisconsinites from federal agencies. Now, for more on this, we spoke with one of the bill's authors, Verona State Rep Mike Bair, for more. Representative Bair, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Will.
So I first want to start with this idea that the federal government might be, shortchanging Wisconsin a little bit. Do you have like a top-line number for us on what that might look like?
Well, I think there's still calculations going on to figure out exactly what it's going to look like, given that the big, beautiful bill just passed about a month ago. And we passed our state budget in part in response to that and in anticipation that it was going to be passed. And so A lot of those calculations are ongoing right now, and it's not going to be an easy dollar amount to have to take care of at the state level, unfortunately.
So I know we've looked at especially the Dane County level, where it's seen, especially during the pandemic and with the Biden kind of infrastructure bill, a lot of money coming into the county level. If we see that start to dry up or see broadly federal funds start to dry up, what kind of impact would that have, especially locally in a place like Dane County?
Well, that could be devastating. We've been seeing dollars flowing to our area, particularly to UW for health research, for other research. That's one of the biggest drivers of our state's economy, and certainly a driver of our economy locally. And losing those dollars would be devastating to those students, to people who benefit from that research, to people who work at the university. My district has thousands of people who work at UW and work in state government. So cuts to government efforts have a big impact locally, and that's something I'm certainly watching closely. I think a number of us are watching very closely, and we have to be mindful of what that can do on a micro level to our economy.
Now, under this idea that there's a little bit of a give and take between Wisconsin and the federal government, how much money do we give back to the feds?
It's billions of dollars, and that's something that my colleagues and I have been conscious of and treat as a potential tool. And one of the bills that we introduced earlier this year in the Protect Wisconsinites package is one that would allow the state to withhold dollars from the federal government, dollar for dollar. If the federal government was holding dollars, the state government would hold dollars. And that's just one tool that we're hopeful would be useful in making sure that those dollars would be flowing to Wisconsin to have that economic benefit and do the programming that Wisconsinites rely on.
Now, this is a Democratic bill in the time of Trump, right? Have we seen anything like this, though, happen before in prior administrations?
Well, I think there have been efforts at the federal level by both Democrats and Republicans at something called impoundment, which was eventually found to be illegal, made illegal, and it was a tool that the executive branch was holding on to dollars that Congress had appropriated, had been signed into law. And so this isn't a new concept, but it's being used on a scale and magnitude by the Trump administration that in a way that is disturbing and certainly troubling and has negative economic benefits during a time when we are struggling with rising costs. That's the biggest concern we heard from voters last year, and something we need to be certainly mindful of going forward, and something that this big, beautiful bill and the efforts happening at the federal level just aren't helping right now.
Now, we're talking a lot about the money, certainly, but another piece of this package of bills is dealing with the personal information of Wisconsinites and blocking that from going to the federal government. Do you have a sense of how much of our personal information is available to the feds right now?
Oh, there's a sizable amount. The largest programming that the state does is in Medicaid and health, and that collects all of our personal sensitive data. A lot of things that the state is holding on to there that the federal government could get. And what the bill that I introduced along with Senator Hesselbein would do, and we have support from almost all of our Democratic colleagues in the Assembly and in the state Senate, would protect Wisconsinites' data and prevent anyone in the state government from sending data to the federal government that's not that would be personally identifiable. And so any of the data that's collected, whether that's in health, in education, in unemployment, and any other of the buckets that the state government collects data in, that would be protected from the view of the federal government.
Now, kind of a favorite question in the Capitol. As you mentioned, this has broad Democratic support. Do you have any support across the aisle?
No, and I've certainly tried. I've had conversations with Republicans about this, and protecting data is a conservative principle. There's a point on the political spectrum, I think, where progressives and civil libertarians meet up, and protecting people from the overreach of government has always been a conservative principle. It's been a liberal principle, something that crosses the political spectrum. And as Americans, I think we have a history and certainly a rightful sort of skepticism of government overreach. And, the conversations I had with Republicans was a couple of nodding heads, yeah, it makes sense, but nobody willing to sign on. There haven't been any Republicans at the state level in our legislature, in the Senate or the Assembly, who have been willing to go against the word or the efforts of the Trump administration, and that's disappointing. I think Wisconsinites are relying on us to do what's best for them and not do what's best for President Trump.
Representative Baer, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time. Appreciate your attention on this issue.
Our conversation there with State Rep Mike Baer. When we come back, we take a look at the advocacy for child victims of sex crimes in the wake of allegations against a Sun Prairie school official. We'll have more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. Parents of Sun Prairie West students are demanding answers after a former dean of students was charged for child sex crimes. Robert Gilkey Meisegeier is charged with 13 counts of possessing child sexual abuse material and 2 counts of child sexual exploitation. Now, these charges stem from alleged sexual encounters that he had with students both on and off school grounds. Now, a criminal complaint says that school staff members learned about the alleged incidents but didn't tell police. Now, Sun Prairie officers only began investigating after a student came forward to them. Joining us now is Safe Harbor Executive Director Jennifer Ginsburg, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
So I do want to get to this point of, when we see an incident like this, if there's like a right way to handle this, what's supposed to happen when we get to this?
So in an organization that's serving children, the professionals in that organization, so that's all school personnel or camps or daycares or that kind of thing, the law requires you that if you have a suspicion of abuse or have been made aware of abuse, you need to report that externally to Human Services or law enforcement. And so, so it is incumbent upon the professionals, all staff within a school system, that if there are concerns that are brought to them, they need to report it. They do not need to investigate it. They do not need to first determine if it's true. They need to report that suspicion to investigators, and that's Human Services or law enforcement.
And when we kind of throw out the phrase of mandatory reporters, these are the people that we're talking about here, right?
Right, so everyone who works in a school or in a child-serving organization, like a camp or a daycare, they are required by law to report any concerns around that a child has been abused. So if they're made aware of information, if they have concern that abuse has happened or could happen, they need to report those concerns, again, externally, like an internal report. Many places have policies around who, if someone has knowledge, who are they supposed to talk to? Maybe they have to talk to a principal or a social worker, but that report needs to be made. And in fact, the statute indicates that report needs to be made like within, I believe it's 24 hours. So that report to Human Services and or law enforcement needs to be made immediately.
So now, when we're talking about this report, this is after something has already happened, but we're talking kind of in the break about ways to kind of interrupt, get ahead of this curve, how we can intervene ahead of something like this happening. How would we go about that?
Yeah, well, I think the thing to keep in mind is sort of why don't people report? And people don't report because of a number of reasons. So sometimes they might think, it's not my business. And that's where we have to remember that if we're in an organization that's serving children, we are all responsible for their safety. But a lot of times it's because offenders groom the child, but they also groom the coworkers, they groom the family members, so that if an allegation or disclosure does come out about something this person has done, the people around them say, oh, they could never do that. They're so nice. They've been so good to our family. They're always so helpful. I just couldn't believe that this could be true. And so that makes people hesitant to report. Or the feeling that, what if it's not true? I would hate to, get them in trouble. But again, the law really specifically states that it doesn't have to be proven. There just has to be a concern, and that concern needs to be reported. You talk about getting ahead of it. I mean, again, the youth-serving organizations really have a tall order in front of them to how to make their environment safer. And the unfortunate reality that I think we all need to kind of face is that people who are going to sexually abuse children and teenagers want to work at youth-serving organizations because that's where they want the access to the children. And so these organizations need to look at how do we create a framework so that those offenders aren't able to work here. And one way we do that is that we create a culture where certain behaviors are not tolerated. That children are not to be alone with a teacher or a coach or a specialist or whatever, one-on-one, without anyone else around. You're not to meet with a student in your office with the doors closed. You do it in open space, or you keep your door open and make sure other people are around. You're not offering a child a ride home. You're not coming to their house. You're not, especially with teenagers in this day of, digital communication, there's not, texting and photos and all those kinds of things. Like when those rules and guidelines are in place, someone who is looking to exploit children coming into that organization or considering that organization will see, well, there's not a lot of latitude for me. It's kind of like, putting the fence to keep the wolf out.
Well, Jennifer Ginsburg, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Now, when we come back, the Wisconsin State Fair kicks off this week. We'll have some hot food takes when we come back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. It's late summer here in Wisconsin, which means that the Wisconsin State Fair is underway. Governor Evers did his usual work to kick off the state fair, serving his beloved cream puffs. Now, the fair in suburban Milwaukee runs through August 10th. Now, a reminder that you can watch full episodes of the show, as well as expanded interviews on our website at channel3000.com. That does it for us this week. I'm Will Keneally. Have a great rest of your weekend.
This has been For the Record.